do this.
You can have redundant routers, dual power feeds, and enough cloud buzzwords to fill a bingo card. Yet still have one tiny overlooked thing that can take your whole PSAP out like a folding chair at a family reunion. Today I want to talk about single points of failure that you forgot that you had. Not the obvious ones, the sneaky ones. The ones that are hiding behind the words, "It's fine," and "We've never had a problem with that." And that's up next on TiPS, Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS, Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm a NENA certified ENP. And every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I try to bring you the latest, most relevant, and critical topics that affect your center and emergency communications. Today, we're taking a deep dive into single points of failure, specifically the ones you forgot that you had. Now, I want to start off with the truth that we all know, but rarely admit, at least out loud. Most outages don't start with the big scary stuff. They start with that one overlooked dependency that everybody assumed was handled. And the reason that we forget these single points of failure is simple. They're boring. They're not glamorous. They rarely make it to the executive slide deck. And a lot of times, they're stuck in the closet, literally. So today I want to walk you through some usual suspects and how they can sneak their way into real environments. PSAPs, ECCs, EZNets, enterprise origination networks, as well as call handling, radio rooms, logging, CAD, GIS, and all the connective tissue that we like to believe is secure and immortal. Spoiler alert, it's not. The redundant network with one non-redundant link. Okay, let's say you have two circuits. That's great. Redundancy. Resiliency. Is it? Do they actually take different physical paths all the way between your facility and the data center they connect you with? Because I've seen diverse circuits from different providers sharing the same pole line for 18 miles. And both of those died together when a truck kisses one utility pole at the exact wrong spot. And over my career, I've seen dozens of dual providers that both hand off in the same carrier hotel, the same meet me room, live in the same riser, or the same splice case in the manhole. There was a time earlier in my career that I was reviewing circuit diversity for a large financial institution in New York City. And out of their 800 circuits, more than 70% of them were passing through a busy Manhattan manhole on Thomas Street in downtown Manhattan, where the streets get dug up daily. So close to 600 of their facilities delivering critical voice and data services lay vulnerable to an errant cable markout done by a junior union apprentice and a can of orange spray paint in the wrong spot. That was a big yikes. But here's a single point of failure that you never consider the last 20 feet. You know, that little yellow patch cable in the midst of all the others. That one single switch port or that odd handoff device that nobody wants to touch because it's labeled with a yellow post-it note that says "Do not unplug" scrawled on it from 2014. Oh, and Radio Shack's out of business, so you'll never get another power supply for it. So if your failover plan is the carrier's going to handle it, well, congratulations. The carrier is now part of your architecture. That's not a complaint, that's just physics. Own it, design for it, and test it. Power is not, do you have a generator? Power is another redundancy that is yet another critical resource that gets treated like a checkbox. UPS? Check. Generator? Check. Done. But the real single points of failure are the little power decisions that are made inside the building. One power strip feeding two redundant devices. An overloaded UPS that provides 8 minutes of power when you thought you had 30. One automatic transfer switch that hasn't been turned in years, especially under load, because nobody wants to be responsible for that test going sideways. And my personal favorite, that generator that works perfectly, except that it's chained to a single fuel delivery resource that happens to fail during a regional event. You see, power is not a product, it's a system of components. And fuel is an important one. The Hidden Dependency Olympics. Let's talk about the dependencies that nobody thinks about until the lights actually start flickering. NTP, Network Time Protocol. GPS clocks, providing time sync across logging, recording, CAD, and call handling. You see, when time goes weird, everything goes weird. Recordings drift, logs misalign, correlation can break, and your legal confidence drops completely. Then there's your network's domain network service as another one. DNS is like oxygen. When it's there, nobody claps, but when it's gone, everybody gasps and panics. DNS's job is to point domain names to IP addresses, the logical destination for services. It's how your computer knows what far-end computer to go to and route packets to when you send something to google.com. You don't need to know the IP address, the network gets it there. That's what DNS does. So if your environment relies on hosted DNS, or a single internal DNS server that lives out on one virtual host, you just found a spoiler for your next outage. Then in PSAPs, you've got authentication, Active Directory, single sign-on, certificates. When your call handling solution needs to authenticate users, and that authentication depends on one service, that depends on one domain controller, that depends on one virtual infrastructure, that depends on one storage array, that depends on one... Well, you get the idea. Everything is high availability, right up until it hits the one thing that's not. Cloud doesn't remove single points of failure, it just moves them. Look, cloud can be great if cloud is engineered with discipline. But the cloud doesn't make you immune to single points of failure. It just allows you to change which ones you're likely to ignore. Let me give you an example. If your call handling or supporting services requires an internet path to reach a cloud region, then your local internet edge is now critical infrastructure. That means your firewall pair, your ISP handoff, your BGP configuration, as well as your DDoS posture are all critical. Also, your physical fiber entry, your local power, and your cooling still matter just as much as anything else in that critical chain. And if your vendor has a dependency on a cloud identity provider, a cloud messaging service, a cloud database, or a cloud monitoring plane, then you need to ask one question. What happens when that dependency has a bad day? Not if, but when. Because all major platforms have incidents. It's not a scandal, it's just reality. Stuff breaks. So the risk is not that incidents happen. The risk is that you never planned for the incident you already know is possible. Another single point of failure is people and process. Now, this is the part where I get to step on a few toes gently with supportive shoes. But if only one person knows how to manually fail over the system, you've got a single point of failure. If only one person has the credentials, you've got a single point of failure. If the runbook is called Bob, then Bob is part of your resilience strategy. And Bob is a single point of failure. The bottom line. Single points of failure don't always have to be bad engineering. Most of the time, they're simply the parts that you didn't notice that became critical over time. Networks evolve, systems accrete dependencies. People leave, vendors add features, take others away, your security requirements grow, and integrations multiply. So keep this in mind as the bottom line. Resilience isn't a big decision that you made 5 years ago. It's a bad habit that you practice regularly. Find the boring dependencies, map them out, test them, and then document them. Now you can train around them. And don't just ask, do we have redundancy? Ask a better question. Where does our redundancy quietly collapse into one thing? Because that one thing is coming for you. It doesn't hate you, it's just doing what single points of failure do for a living. That's how they got their name. That wraps up today's episode of TiPS, Today in Public Safety. Thanks so much for listening. I hope I gave you some new perspectives in resiliency, redundancy, and reliability, as well as some insight around the single point of failure monster. For more updates and insights, follow me on social media at Fletch911. And you can visit 911tips.com, where you'll find a complete archive of all of my previous episodes. My blogs are available online at Fletch.tv, and you can find my professional website at Fletch911.com. Stay safe, thanks so much for listening, and if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG 911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10th spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.